Rain falls in slow, deliberate sheets over the dojo, washing the wooden floors and the scent of incense into a mingled perfume of earth and smoke. The warrior moves through the space, steps measured but restless, eyes scanning the room as if seeking something beyond technique. His strikes are sharp, precise, executed with skill honed over countless battles. But his mind is fractured, scattered by doubt and the whisper of fear. Each victory feels incomplete, hollow, a fleeting echo of accomplishment that never truly settles within him. Strength alone has never been enough. The door opens with a quiet push, and the mentor enters. He is a figure of calm authority, presence radiating in waves, as though the very air bends to his discipline. Every gesture is deliberate, measured, and he observes the warrior without judgment. The silence stretches, and in that pause, the warrior feels exposed. The mentor sees what the warrior has long ignored. Talent without mastery is a blade without direction, beauty without purpose. "You fight well," the mentor begins, voice low and unwavering. "But you are unarmed in the face of yourself. Fear is not outside. It lives here." He gestures to the chest. "And here." He gestures to the mind. "You have mastered techniques, but not presence. You have struck opponents, but never confronted the shadow within." The warrior bristles, instinctively defensive, yet something in the calm authority of the mentor arrests his resistance. He is used to controlling outcomes with skill and speed, yet here is a force that cannot be overpowered. The mentor's eyes, steady and patient, reveal an unspoken truth. The path to mastery is merciless, and surrender, not aggression, is the first requirement. The first lesson begins in silence. The mentor watches as the warrior practices strikes and forms, correcting posture, aligning breath, and guiding intention with subtle gestures. Each movement becomes a study not just of technique, but of awareness. The warrior begins to notice the gap between motion and mind. A slight hesitation, a reaction colored by doubt, a rhythm disrupted by fear. These cracks, invisible in combat against others, are glaring under the mentor's scrutiny. By nightfall, the rain has softened to a mist. The warrior sits alone, shoulders heavy with the day's labor, contemplating the words he cannot yet fully grasp. He recalls each fight, each victory, each moment when fear whispered, and he ignored it. He senses that mastery is not in defeating opponents, it is in confronting what he has long avoided. The fragility of the self, the sway of desire, the tremor of unexamined fear. The dojo seems alive in the quiet, the wooden beams echoing the rhythm of his breath. Each inhale is a tether to the present, each exhale a release of pretense. The warrior feels a subtle shift, a stirring awareness that the path ahead will demand more than skill. It will demand surrender, observation, and relentless introspection. The mentor's final words for the day linger in the damp air. "You are capable, yes, but your talent is a shadow without command. To destroy fear, you must first face yourself, unarmed, in silence. Only then will the warrior emerge whole." Transition to Part 2. The first night closes with understanding that the true adversary has never been outside. It has been the mind, restless and unmastered, and tomorrow the path of confrontation begins. Night deepens, cloaking the dojo in shadow, and the warrior sits cross-legged, eyes closed, listening. Rain patters softly on the roof, yet the mind resists silence. Thoughts rise unbidden, past failures, imagined critiques, fleeting desires, the subtle ache of insecurity. Every memory, every doubt, every whisper of fear surfaces with intensity. He feels exposed, raw, as though the walls of the world have vanished and only the turbulence of his own mind remains. The mentor moves silently to a corner, observing without interference. There is no judgment in his presence, only unwavering awareness. It is in this stillness that the warrior begins to sense the first lesson of true mastery. Control is not over circumstances, nor even over others. It is over the self. Awareness, presence, and acceptance of what is, without avoidance or reaction, are the weapons that cut through fear. The warrior's hands tremble as he recalls fights where skill won battles but left him hollow inside. Victory without inner command is brittle. Triumph without presence is fleeting. He feels the weight of unexamined fear, how often it has guided decisions, dictated hesitation, and undermined confidence. The mentor's earlier words echo. The path is merciless, but surrender is the first step toward mastery. Hours pass, yet the warrior does not move. He practices breathing, noticing the rise and fall of his chest, the rhythm of blood in his veins. He traces each strike of the past day in his mind, observing where doubt dictated motion, where ego dictated reaction. Pain, fatigue, and frustration become teachers rather than obstacles, revealing the subtle gaps between strength and mastery, between movement and awareness. Dawn approaches. The mist outside clings to the dojo's wooden beams, and a faint light seeps in, illuminating the warrior's contemplative face. He feels the first spark of understanding. Skill alone does not command fear, nor does strength alone create presence. The shadow he fights is internal, relentless, patient, and he must meet it on its own terms, without avoidance, without distraction, without expectation of external validation. When the mentor finally speaks, it is a soft murmur, yet it carries the weight of certainty. The path of the warrior is forged not in victory, but in the unflinching observation of self. Tonight, you have glimpsed the shadow. Tomorrow, you will begin to face it deliberately, in silence, in practice, in every breath you take. The warrior bows, the serene gesture of respect inward and outward, feeling the subtle tremor of fear mingled with anticipation. He knows the journey has begun in earnest, and that each step forward will require the relentless sharpening of mind, body, and spirit. The shadow is present, but he will not flee. He will meet it. Transition to Chapter 2. Tomorrow, the warrior begins the trial of silence, where the mind's chaos will be exposed and awareness itself will become the edge of the blade. The mountain air is sharp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. The warrior steps onto the path that leads to isolation, each footfall deliberate, each breath measured. His body, honed from years of training, is prepared, but the mind is untested. Here begins the first trial. Silence. No words, no distractions, no companions, only the warrior and the raw landscape of his own consciousness. The mentor watches from a distance, a figure of quiet authority, ensuring that the trial's rigor is maintained without interference. The first day is deceptively calm. The warrior sets up his small shelter and begins the routine. Meditation, repetitive forms, observation of surroundings. At first, silence feels like emptiness, a void pressing against thought. Yet as minutes stretch into hours, the mind stirs, restless and uncooperative. Doubts surface, fear of inadequacy, longing for recognition, regret over past failures. Each thought demands attention, each impulse tempts escape. The warrior realizes quickly that mastery is not about pushing fear away. It is about observing it, understanding it, and moving through it without surrender. Repetition becomes a crucible. The mentor has instructed him to maintain every form with precision, even in discomfort. Every strike, stance, and block is executed with full attention, as if the body itself were a conduit of presence. Pain and fatigue test endurance, yet the real challenge is mental. The warrior confronts the patterns of distraction that have long undermined him. Thoughts of ego, ambition, and attachment rise like waves against a cliff, and he must learn to meet each without reacting, to let awareness guide his motion. By midday, the mountain's silence begins to settle into the warrior's mind. He notices subtle shifts, breath aligning with movement, heartbeats syncing with steps, the flow of energy from intent to action. Fear is no longer merely a threat. It becomes information, a signal to refine attention. Each moment of stillness is a rehearsal for presence, each repetition a sharpening of the mind's edge. The warrior begins to sense that a blade, no matter how strong, is only as sharp as the consciousness that wields it. Night falls. Cold bites into the warrior's bones, yet he sits, cross-legged, eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of rain against rocks, wind through trees, and the pulse within himself. Thoughts flare unpredictably. Unfinished fights, failures, regrets, imagined slights. Fear whispers in 1,000 forms, yet now it is met with acknowledgement rather than resistance. Awareness becomes a weapon, precision a shield, and silence transforms from a void into a forge. The first day concludes with a quiet understanding. Presence is not passive. It is active, deliberate, demanding. The warrior sees that fear is not an enemy to destroy, but a teacher to illuminate weakness, and that mastery begins where the mind is most vulnerable and most disciplined. Transition toward Part 2. As days of solitude stretch onward, the warrior will confront the rising tide of internal chaos, learning that silence is the forge where fear is transformed into precision and presence. The second day dawns grey and solemn, with mist curling around the mountain peaks like silent sentinels. The warrior awakens, muscles stiff, body sore from the first day's trial. Yet the true difficulty is no longer physical. It is the mind, unshackled from distraction, forced to confront its own restlessness. Thoughts surge like wild currents. Fear of inadequacy, desire for recognition, memories of past mistakes. Each impulse, unchecked by conversation or routine, demands awareness. The warrior learns quickly that silence is not comfort, it is confrontation. Meditation becomes a mirror. Sitting cross-legged, he observes the flow of thought and emotion without interference. Regret arises, pride surfaces, and envy whispers. The warrior does not suppress these sensations. Instead, he tracks them, naming each as it appears, allowing insight to take root. Every breath becomes a tether to the present. Every heartbeat reminds him that mastery is not in escape, but in precise observation of the self. Repetition continues relentlessly. Stances, strikes, forms, executed over and over, are no longer drills for the body alone. Each motion becomes a meditation, a dialogue between intent and action. Precision is demanded not for show, but for internal calibration. The warrior notices subtle improvements. His reflexes sharpen, his posture aligns more naturally, and his energy begins to flow without conscious forcing. Pain and exhaustion are now signals, guides that mark the boundaries of endurance and the path toward focus. The silence deepens as night falls again. Alone, he walks the ridge, feeling the wind and the earth beneath his feet. In this quiet, fear becomes tangible, less a phantom of imagination, more a subtle, illuminating force. Each heartbeat, each breath, each step becomes a test of presence. He understands that mastery begins not when the mind is calm, but when it is fully awake to its own turbulence, yet chooses deliberate, measured action over reaction. By the final day of the trial, the warrior feels a subtle transformation. The chaos of thought, once overwhelming, now serves as information. The restless mind becomes a guide, fear a teacher, and silence the sharp edge of understanding. The warrior recognizes the paradox. The mind that cannot endure itself cannot wield a sword with clarity. The spirit that avoids discomfort cannot master fear. Presence, once abstract, is now tangible, a tool as vital as any blade. When the mentor finally approaches, he does so without fanfare. "You have begun to see," he says softly, "that stillness is not passivity. Fear is not your adversary. Both are tools, guides along the path of awareness. The blade is only as sharp as the mind behind it. Today, you have begun to temper both." Transition to Chapter 3. Having learned to cultivate presence through silence, the warrior is now ready to face fear in its most direct, uncompromising forms, testing courage and discipline against the raw forces of body and mind. The sun rises over jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the valley below. The warrior stands at the edge of a cliff, the wind tugging at his clothing, the abyss yawning beneath him. Heights, isolation, exposure. These are the first instruments of the mentor's new trial. The lessons of silence have prepared the mind, yet fear now confronts the body directly. Heart pounds, breath quickens, and instinct screams to retreat. The warrior recalls the meditations, the endless repetitions, the observation of thoughts. But the challenge of facing fear in its pure, visceral form is unlike anything before. The mentor watches from a safe distance, calm, unmoving, radiating authority. "Courage is not absence of fear," he says, voice carrying on the wind. "It is action in its presence." The warrior does not wait for the heart to be calm. He acts while it beats in protest. The warrior steps forward, one foot after the other, feeling the precipice beneath him, the wind threatening imbalance. Each movement requires deliberate focus, aligning breath, posture, and attention. He feels the old instinct to flee, the urge to rationalize avoidance, yet each step forward is a victory over himself. Here, fear is tangible, undeniable, a force that can teach if met with discipline and awareness. After the cliff, the mentor introduces controlled combat. Superior opponents, unpredictable strikes, sudden feints, all designed to provoke hesitation and doubt. The warrior experiences the duality of fear. It alerts, it heightens, it threatens. Pain and exhaustion follow swiftly. Each misstep reveals attachment to comfort, reliance on ego, and the mind's impulse to anticipate certainty. Yet now, he draws upon lessons of silence and presence. Instead of reacting instinctively, he observes, adapts, and moves with intention. Every strike and block becomes an exercise in awareness, a dialogue between fear and precision. Isolation complements combat. The warrior spends hours alone in high passes, exposed to wind, cold, and solitude. Fear manifests differently here, not as immediate threat, but as existential pressure. Thoughts of inadequacy, mortality, and failure rise sharply. His body shivers, but his mind recalls the silent lessons of mountains and forms, of breath and meditation. Fear is no longer external. It is the lens through which he examines weakness and opportunity. Each shiver, each hesitation, each pang of doubt becomes an indicator, a signal to refine attention, to strengthen presence, to sharpen awareness. By evening, fatigue is profound, yet a subtle shift begins. The warrior notices his pulse steady under strain, his breath deepening even when the wind cuts through him. Action no longer depends solely on muscle memory or instinct. It arises from integrated awareness. The fear that once dominated now informs and guides rather than dictates. Pain and uncertainty are recognized as teachers, not adversaries. The warrior senses the first glimmer of Zanshin, readiness without tension, presence without ego, vigilance without anxiety. Transition toward Part 2. In the coming days, the trials intensify, heights, isolation, combat. But each confrontation with fear will refine instinct into discipline and uncertainty into calm mastery. The trials deepen. The mentor leads the warrior to jagged cliffs, dense forests, and secluded ridges where danger is constant but controlled. Superior opponents challenge him relentlessly, faster, stronger, more unpredictable. Each bout strips away attachment to comfort and certainty, leaving the warrior exposed not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. Pain gnaws at muscles, exhaustion clouds perception, yet the warrior continues, guided by the awareness honed in silence. Fear, once tyrannical, becomes a signal, alerting him to vulnerability, illuminating the cracks in his discipline. Controlled exposure forces the warrior to act despite terror. He leaps across unstable surfaces, balances on narrow ridges, and faces combatants without hesitation. Each success is not triumph, but a lesson in action under duress. He begins to recognize that courage is cultivated, not inherited, and it emerges only when fear is acknowledged and integrated into every motion. The body obeys, the mind observes, the spirit remains vigilant. Isolation amplifies the lessons. Alone in freezing nights, the warrior confronts existential fear, the awareness of mortality, failure, and insignificance. The mind invents scenarios, projecting doubt and insecurity. Yet he does not flee. Breathing deliberately, he recalls the silence of meditation and the focus of repetitive forms. Each heartbeat, each inhalation becomes an anchor. Fear is no longer a tyrant but a teacher, revealing hidden weakness, guiding adaptation, and sharpening presence. Combat exercises reinforce this integration. Each opponent tests speed, strength, and cunning, yet also attention and awareness. The warrior's reactions are no longer reflexive. They are measured, deliberate, and instinctive simultaneously. Every strike is a conversation between self and environment, body and mind, presence and uncertainty. Mistakes are noted without judgment, observed as data for refinement. Pain is endured without flinching, doubt acknowledged without yielding. By the end of this crucible, the warrior achieves a subtle transformation. Fear remains, but it is no longer commanding. Action and observation coexist. Courage flows naturally from awareness. Zanshin, the state of continuous readiness, manifests not as tension or anticipation, but as effortless alignment with the present moment. The warrior moves with silent confidence, aware of threats, attuned to surroundings, yet unbound by ego or panic. The mentor finally steps forward, voice steady. You have faced what most flee from. Fear has been a mirror, showing both weakness and potential. Now, it is no longer your master. You command it. Remember this. The warrior is defined not by absence of fear, but by the disciplined presence that transforms it into power. Transition to Chapter 4. Having internalized fear, the warrior now enters the unyielding realm of discipline, where monotony, repetition, and endurance forge the invisible strength of mind, body, and spirit. Dawn rises over the mountain dojo, pale light spilling across the courtyard and illuminating the warrior's form as he begins another day of unyielding training. Fatigue presses against his body, a constant reminder of every previous trial. Yet the real challenge is not exhaustion. It is monotony, repetition, and the relentless demand for presence. Each stance, strike, and movement is executed with deliberate focus, every repetition a lesson in precision and alignment. The warrior begins to understand that mastery is forged not in moments of exhilaration, but in the unseen labor of the ordinary, the repetition no one witnesses. The mentor observes quietly, correcting posture, adjusting alignment, yet offering no consolation. Discipline is the teacher now, uncompromising, unflinching. Mastery is invisible, he reminds the warrior. It is built not for applause, not for recognition, but for integrity of mind, body, and spirit. Each day is a test of patience, of endurance, and of the ability to engage fully with the present. The warrior moves through routines with painstaking care. Forms once performed mechanically are now infused with mindfulness. Breath synchronizes with motion. Muscles recall patterns while the mind remains awake and attentive. The monotony, once agonizing, becomes meditative, sharpening awareness in subtle ways. Fatigue signals opportunity. Pain indicates the boundaries of resilience, and repetition tempers the will like water smoothing stone over centuries. Ego rises, as always, whispering of shortcuts, of deserved relief, of recognition earned through talent rather than effort. Yet the warrior notices these impulses, acknowledges them, and returns to the discipline without judgment. The struggle is internal as much as external. The mind must learn to surrender to process, the body to obey without complaint, the spirit to endure without distraction. Presence is no longer a concept. It is lived in every measured step and every deliberate breath. Physical strength is complemented by mental and spiritual cultivation. Meditation punctuates the day, sharpening attention and quieting internal chatter. Awareness of surroundings, subtle shifts in light, sound, and motion become exercises in vigilance and responsiveness. Fear, once a dominating force, is now a signal to refine action, not a trigger for retreat. Each repetition, each motion, each meditation tightens the bond between mind and body, forging the foundation of invisible mastery. By evening, muscles ache, yet a quiet satisfaction pervades the warrior's mind. Discipline has revealed itself not as punishment, but as liberation. The paradox that true strength is found not in indulgence or exertion alone, but in the relentless alignment of intention, action, and observation. The body moves with fluidity, the mind observes without distraction, and the spirit maintains an inner equilibrium that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Transition toward Part 2. As the days of relentless practice accumulate, the warrior begins to perceive the subtle, unshakable power of discipline, a force that transcends physical skill and shapes mind and spirit alike. The following days blend into one another, yet each repetition brings new insight. The warrior rises before dawn, muscles protesting, lungs burning, yet his mind moves with clarity previously unknown. Every motion is executed with precision, every breath observed, every heartbeat noted. The mentor watches from a distance, rarely speaking, for words cannot convey the lessons embedded in monotony. Discipline is not a teacher that can lecture. It is a forge that shapes through relentless pressure. Fatigue and resistance become companions, not enemies. The warrior notices subtle improvements: balance more stable, reflexes quicker, attention unbroken even under strain. Each exercise, though repetitive, reinforces presence. He learns to find joy not in accomplishment, but in the process itself, in the alignment of mind, body, and spirit. The repetitive strike of the wooden sword, the endless meditation, the solitary focus, these are the invisible scaffolding upon which true mastery is built. The mind is tested as rigor intensifies. Thoughts of doubt, impatience, and desire for recognition rise unbidden, seeking to disrupt focus. The warrior greets them without reaction, observing them as data rather than commands. Ego, once insistent and loud, is now recognized as a tool to sharpen awareness, to signal distraction, to measure progress. Through this, the warrior internalizes the paradox of mastery. Strength is not forceful. It is subtle, persistent, invisible, yet unyielding when tested. By the week's end, the body has adapted to the regimen, muscles remembering every stance and strike instinctively. The mind, trained through observation, has become an ally rather than a saboteur. The warrior's presence is tangible. Every movement flows seamlessly, every reaction is measured, and every breath is deliberate. Discipline, once a burden, has become a foundation, a force that structures existence, integrating courage, awareness, and readiness into a single, cohesive whole. In quiet moments between training, he observes nature, the way a river carves rock over centuries, the swaying of a tree that bends but does not break, the silent rhythm of wind through bamboo. Each becomes a metaphor, reinforcing the lessons of discipline, presence, and patience. The warrior realizes that mastery is not demonstrated in a single strike or victory, but is the steady alignment of self over time, unseen by the world, yet invincible in essence. The mentor finally speaks as the sun dips below the peaks. You have walked the relentless path. Strength is visible in muscles, but mastery is invisible in the mind and spirit. Continue, and fear will no longer dictate your actions. The foundation is laid. What follows is integration and confrontation with the self. Transition to Chapter 5. Having internalized discipline, the warrior is now ready to confront the final obstacle: the ego, the subtle master of perception, desire, and pride. The dojo is quiet, bathed in the muted light of early morning. The warrior enters, muscles honed, mind sharpened, spirit tempered, but the final trial awaits. This is no test of strength, endurance, or courage. It is a confrontation with the self. The mentor stands at the center, calm and unyielding, radiating authority without a word. Today, he says softly, you face the adversary that no opponent can defeat, your own ego. The warrior feels a familiar surge of tension. Pride, attachment, and desire have been companions and obstacles alike, whispering promises of recognition, superiority, and control. He has seen fear, endured fatigue, embraced silence, but ego remains a subtle, persistent force, shaping perception, twisting action, and corrupting clarity. Now, under the mentor's gaze, these illusions are laid bare. Sparring begins, not against strangers, but against the mentor himself. Each feint, strike, and counterattack is designed to expose not weakness in technique, but imbalance in mind. Every hesitation, every reactive motion, every trace of pride is magnified. The warrior senses the familiar impulse to justify, to assert, to dominate. And he recognizes it for what it is, the ego seeking control, even in a trial of presence. Dialogue supplements combat. The mentor probes deeper, asking questions that cut beneath the surface. Why do you fight? For mastery or for recognition? For presence or for pride? The warrior struggles for answers. Every response reveals subtle attachments he had never acknowledged. Each admission is uncomfortable, yet illuminating. The ego, which once drove ambition and masked fear, now becomes visible, tangible, a mirror reflecting both potential and limitation. Reflection is the final instrument. Alone, the warrior examines past victories and defeats, observing patterns where ego influenced thought and action. Pride, envy, and attachment to identity are revealed as distortions, shallow victories that obscured true power. He confronts the truth. Skill without self-command is hollow, presence without humility is fragile, and courage without awareness is incomplete. Ego is no longer just a challenge, it is a teacher. By the end of this first part, the warrior begins to integrate lessons from silence, fear, and discipline into a cohesive awareness. Strength is understood not as assertion, but as insight. Courage as action tempered by reflection. Presence as alignment of mind, body, and spirit. He senses that mastery is not in dominance over others, but in recognition, regulation, and integration of self. Transition toward Part 2. The ultimate revelation approaches as a failure strips ego bare, forcing the warrior to wield it not as master, but as servant. The pivotal moment comes without warning. During sparring, the warrior misjudges a strike, leaving himself entirely exposed. The mentor's response is precise and unrelenting, reflecting not weakness of body, but the shadow of ego. Pride fractures instantly. Humiliation surfaces, raw and unavoidable. Every instinct urges justification, defense, or retreat. But the mentor remains still, a mirror of unwavering awareness. The warrior feels the full weight of his own illusions. Alone afterward, he sits on the polished wood, observing the tension in his shoulders, the rapid pulse in his chest, the restless thoughts swirling in his mind. For the first time, failure is not a lesson in technique, it is revelation. He sees clearly how ego has shaped decisions, skewed perception, and hindered growth. Pride, attachment, and the hunger for recognition are no longer abstract. They are chains to be broken, tools to be repurposed. Over the following days, the warrior integrates this insight into practice. Each strike, movement, and breath is infused with awareness. Ego becomes a servant rather than master, informing but not controlling. Desire, once scattered and distracting, is harnessed to fuel presence and discipline. He moves beyond reaction into instinctive, mindful action. Failures are observed without judgment. Fear is acknowledged without domination, and pride is tempered by humility. The transformation is subtle yet profound. Movements flow effortlessly, mind and body coalesce, and spirit carries a quiet confidence. Mastery is no longer an abstract ideal. It is embodied in each deliberate action. The warrior understands that victories over others are meaningless without mastery over self. Ego, once an obstacle, is now a measure, a tool that sharpens awareness and guides presence. The mentor finally speaks, voice calm but carrying weight. You have looked into the mirror. You have seen the illusions that once ruled you. Strength is tempered by humility. Courage is guided by awareness. Presence is cultivated, not claimed. Fear and ego are no longer masters. They are instruments. Remember this always. The warrior rises, feeling the subtle power of integration. Fear, discipline, presence, and ego aligned. No longer a mere fighter, he has become a disciplined, present, fearless spirit. Transition to Chapter 6. With ego integrated and fear subdued, the warrior is prepared to face the culminating test, the ultimate expression of Zanshin, where mind, body, and spirit converge in absolute mastery. The first light of dawn brushes the mountaintop with gold, spilling across the courtyard where the warrior stands. Every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat is poised in quiet anticipation. Today is the culmination of all trials. Silence, fear, discipline, and ego have been tested, refined, and integrated. The mentor stands opposite, a figure of calm authority, radiating presence without effort. No words are exchanged. The lesson is now lived, not taught. The ceremonial duel begins with subtle movements, a bow, a measured step, the alignment of posture and breath. The warrior feels the weight of previous trials in his body, the lessons of presence in his mind, the harmony of spirit in his chest. This is Zanshin, the perfect integration of attention, readiness, and awareness. Every action flows without hesitation. Every motion is guided by observation rather than reaction. Fear, once dominant, is acknowledged and transformed into clarity. Ego, once controlling, is now a servant of discernment. The mentor attacks with unpredictable strikes, testing not strength but presence. Each motion probes the warrior's alignment, attention, and composure. The warrior responds instinctively, yet with deliberate mindfulness. He does not act from desire or ego. There is no aggression, no competition. Every strike, block, and step arises from unity of mind, body, and spirit. This is mastery distilled: action without thought, presence without distraction, courage without fear. Subtlety becomes the battlefield. The duel is not loud or dramatic, but in every micro-movement, every flicker of balance, every shift in weight, the warrior embodies centuries of wisdom. The rhythm of combat becomes meditation, each strike a statement of awareness. The mind observes, the body moves, and the spirit aligns. There is no room for doubt. Hesitation is eliminated by training, silence, and discipline. Zanshin manifests not as tension, but as effortless readiness, a state in which every element of self is coherent and complete. The mentor tests beyond physicality. He shifts posture, slows, pauses, forces the warrior to act without external provocation. The warrior's attention remains absolute. Presence, once cultivated through repetition, meditation, and confrontation with fear and ego, now directs every response. Action and awareness are inseparable. The duel ends not with a dramatic strike, but with perfect equilibrium, a moment where all lessons converge, and mastery is evident in its quiet, unshakable form. Transition toward Part 2. The ultimate integration of self is complete, yet the final step awaits. The warrior must step beyond ceremony into the world, carrying Zanshin in every breath, motion, and decision. The duel concludes in silence. No victory cry, no outward display, only the resonance of presence and alignment. The warrior stands, chest rising and falling in measured rhythm, senses alert, mind calm, spirit poised. Zanshin is no longer an abstract ideal. It is lived, breathed, embodied. Every movement, from the flicker of an eyelid to the shift of weight, is deliberate, precise, and harmonized with the environment. Mastery is visible not in aggression, but in composure. The mentor observes, silent yet deeply approving. Few endure the path fully, he says. Many acquire skill, some endure trials, but only those who integrate fear, ego, and discipline into presence achieve this. Remember, Mastery is not a moment. It is a life lived with awareness, readiness, and humility. The warrior steps beyond the dojo gates into the dawn. Mist drifts along the valley, the air crisp, carrying the scents of earth and pine. He moves without hurry, without thought, yet fully aware of each sensation. Fear, once tyrannical, is acknowledged, but does not dictate action. Ego is recognized and employed as a tool, not a master. Discipline structures each breath, each step, each glance. Every action is a manifestation of lessons learned, a reflection of centuries of wisdom distilled into a living form. Silence accompanies him, not as emptiness, but as companion. The flow of wind, the murmur of distant water, the subtle movement of shadows across the peaks, all are integrated into a heightened awareness. He has learned that the warrior's path is lifelong, and mastery is not achieved in triumph alone, but in continuous alignment of mind, body, and spirit. Zanshin is now instinctive, the capacity to act with perfect awareness at any moment, regardless of circumstance. The mentor watches from the ridge, a subtle nod acknowledging the culmination of years of guidance. The warrior, alone now, embodies a truth few can endure, that fear is destroyed not by fleeing, but by disciplined presence, that strength is forged not in ego, but in alignment, that courage emerges from conscious integration of mind, body, and spirit. As he walks into the emerging sun, the warrior carries the essence of Zanshin, a living manifestation of self-mastery that transcends circumstance, challenge, and time. Presence, discipline, courage, and humility are no longer teachings. They are life itself. Closing moral. Fear is destroyed not by fleeing, but by disciplined presence, relentless practice, and the ruthless mastery of self.